the one thing these clients ask every day is, what do I feed my pet? Or when COVID happens, now what do we do? And we are not providing the background education and the support to make our amazing general practitioners who are experts in everything confident and comfortable to make these recommendations. And that is a failing of the system, not a failing of you guys.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for such a cool episode. This one is extra special. It's brought to you by Embrace, NAVC's advocacy initiative. Joining me for this episode were two esteemed guests, board-certified veterinary nutritionist Dr. Lindsey Bullen and President and CEO of the Pet Food Initiative, Dana Brooks. And together, we kind of had a panel discussion and delved into the current state of the pet food industry and the introduction of the PURR Act, or Pet Food Uniform Regulatory Reform Act, and its expected influence on the future of the pet food industry. Before jumping into talking about the act itself, we explored the journey of a bill becoming law, and Dana did a great job illustrating that the reality is not always as simple as what we may have learned in Schoolhouse Rock, which I realize I may be aging myself with that reference, but still such a great illustration of the intended process of a bill becoming a law. And in addition to that, Dana also shared encouraging words on how we as constituents can effectively use our voices and influence legislative change. She offered tips on contacting congresspeople and making sure our voices are heard. From there, we dove into why the PURR Act is a significant piece of legislation and what changes we can expect once it's implemented, and what it means for pet food safety and standards. These were truly just a few of the questions we tackled during this discussion. We also spent time on the importance of nutrition education in veterinary schools and veterinary technician programs. Dr. Bullen reminded us why a solid foundation in nutrition is essential for all veterinary professionals because, I don't know about you, but for me, nutrition is certainly a key part of wellness care for my patients, and understanding the ins and outs of nutritional recommendations in the pet food industry is essential in being able to make good recommendations for clients and patients. Needless to say, it was an enlightening conversation filled with expert insight, practical advice, and a deeper understanding of the pet food industry. Let me introduce our guests so we can go ahead and jump in. Dr. Lindsey Bullen earned her BA in chemistry and her Bachelor's of Science in zoology at North Carolina State University in 2007. She remained at North Carolina State for her post-baccalaureate training, where she received her doctorate of veterinary medicine in 2012, completed a medical and surgical internship in 2013, a residency in 2016, and a fellowship in 2017. Following board certification in veterinary nutrition in 2017, Dr. Bullen created the Clinical Nutrition Service at the Veterinary Specialty Hospital of the Carolinas. The year 2022 brought new opportunities as Dr. Bullen partnered with Dr. Emily Lusagna and created the Clinical Nutrition Service at Friendship Hospital for Animals in the DC area. She's been working there happily ever since. Dr. Bullen is particularly interested in clinical nutrition application, specifically critical care, multi-disease state, and assisted feeding. Though she's no longer in academia, Dr. Bullen brings experience and a strong passion for teaching. And when she's not actively working in clinics or speaking at conferences, Dr. Bullen acts as an industry advisor and consultant through her company, Bullen Veterinary Consulting PLLC. Dana Brooks serves as president and CEO for the Pet Food Institute. With over 30 years of experience across food and agricultural industries, Dana is a trusted advisor in the pet food industry. Prior to joining PFI, Dana was the Senior Director of Government Relations at Land O'Lakes Incorporated, where she focused on state governments and industry relations at the Arden Hills, Minnesota headquarters. Dana has lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for more than 15 years and has represented a range of agricultural interests. Her resume includes Director of Government Relations for Elanco Animal Health, Senior Vice President of Government Relations for the National Milk Producers Federation, and the Director of Public Policy at the American Farm Bureau Federation. Dana began her career in the nation's capital as a legislative assistant in the U.S. House of Representatives for former Representatives Marion Barry and Joanne Emerson. In 2002, she founded the Cuba Working Group in the House of Representatives and led a congressional delegation to Cuba to meet with former President Fidel Castro to discuss agricultural trade and humanitarian aid between the U.S. and Cuban governments. She earned her bachelor's degree in agriculture from the University of Arkansas, Monticello, and a master's degree in agribusiness from Kansas State University. Dana was awarded the Alumni Merit Award at her alma mater at the University of Arkansas, Monticello in 2008, Arkansas State University Agricultural Outstanding Alumnus in 2018, and she's currently serving as an industry advisor for the Kansas State Master of Agribusiness program. Dana's passions include scuba diving, spearfishing, boating, horseback riding, skeet shooting, and hosting women in agriculture events. Both were amazing guests. It made for a great discussion. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Nutrition is the cornerstone of our patients' health and happiness. The veterinary healthcare team should be the ultimate source for top-notch pet nutrition info. When clients see how the right diet helps their pets stay healthy and happy, they visit us more often. Remember, good nutrition is essential. It's smart business and great medicine. Enroll in the NAVC Pet Nutrition Coach certification today on vetfolio.com.
Super excited for this episode. We don't often get to do these roundtable discussions, and I feel like there's so much to say. I know I get a lot out of them. So let me welcome both of you and say thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Lindsey Bullen, who we've done so much work together, and it's always so much fun, and Dana Brooks of the Pet Food Institute. We're going to learn about some new legislation around pet food. So thank you both so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to be here as always. And Dana, it's so lovely to meet you. I've been a huge fan of yours forever, so I'm so excited I actually get to have this conversation.
Oh my gosh, you're my fan club of one then. Thank you.
Well, fan club of one, president, past president, future president.
Oh my
Lindsey,
gosh,
it's a pleasure to meet you as well.
We're headed in the right direction already. I love this. So let's kind of take it way back before we get into this actual legislation. You know, I'm going back to like the days of Schoolhouse Rock in school. You know, I'm just a bill. And, you know, thinking about kind of the normal order for passing a bill into law, because, you know, I have my Schoolhouse Rock picture, but I understand it's not always that simple. So Dana, can you kind of walk us through that normal order for passing a bill into law and then maybe some of the nuances around it?
Sure, happy to. Every once in a while, just for fun, I have to watch the Schoolhouse Rock video and get some laughs like, oh yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be done. That's the way it was meant to be done. But it's a little bit different these days. But if, you know, to go back to your fifth grade, probably civics or government class, one of the things that is exciting about how a bill becomes a law, or the idea of it, usually starts local. You know, there's an issue that you see or have that impacts maybe you, your community, your industry, and you reach out to a member of Congress, you talk through it, you socialize it maybe with other colleagues or interest groups, and then together you jointly look at how legislation can be drafted to address the situation. Then that member of Congress takes that, you know, sponsors the legislation, looks for co-sponsors to the legislation, and then, you know, then it would go to, it would be introduced in the House where it's given I'm going to start with the House of Representatives. So then it's given a bill number, then it's assigned a committee of jurisdiction. From there, then the committee would, you know, entertain maybe a briefing, a hearing, and a markup on the legislation. Then it would proceed, could go to the House floor for a vote, or it could simultaneously be introduced in the Senate, where it goes through the exact same process of sponsor, co-sponsor, committee of jurisdiction, and then it would go to both chambers for a vote. If the bill is different, slightly different, then they would have a conference of the committee to work out those differences. Then it would be reintroduced to each chamber for a final vote. Then it goes to the president to be signed into the law. You know, there's all the pocket veto, but then once it's signed into law, so you have legislation that becomes a bill that becomes law. And so that's the normal order. And A lot of people want to go back to normal order. It is a very clear process. It could be a little bit muddy, but today it's a little bit different because, I've seen a change over 24 years of working in Washington, D.C., where leadership of each chamber has a larger role to play in legislation. There hasn't been a lot of normal order in the last few years. And part of that is because both chambers, the majority is so tight that every single piece of legislation becomes some type of policy, political football. So it's like making sure that leadership agrees to it. So they're either not embarrassed on the floor or they can get full passage of it. So it's a little bit different. So when you hear about these bills passing in the middle of the night, that's like 15,000 pages, and there's something in there that you say got snuck into the bill. Well, unfortunately, that kind of seems the way that we've been going in the last few years with even funding the government. So that's why we keep seeing these what's called a continuing resolution, just to keep the government funded, to be able to keep those agencies working that are important to us. So it's fun. It's wonky. You got to love politics or policy. I'm a policy writer more than a politician or a politico, but it takes both to move legislation into law.
Wow. Even just remembering like the normal process of a bill being passed into law is a lot to wrap your head around. But you're absolutely right. Like it's become so much more nuanced, so much more complicated over the years, which I'm so happy that, you're there writing policy and advocating for these different bills to make sure that, that we keep things headed in the right direction. And you kind of mentioned watching things change over the years that you've been in Washington. And I think, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn and just for myself. I think we can all kind of feel that a little bit as voters of,
Yes.
Just things are a little bit different. And, sometimes it can be discouraging. So I'm curious to hear your take on the influence that we have as voters. How do we make our voices heard and feel confident that our voices are being heard?
Don't underestimate what you can do as a voter. Even when you look and think, this is really dysfunctional, does my voice matter? Does it make a difference? Congressional, House of Representatives and senators, they represent you. You are their voter. You are their constituent. And there's still what I fondly call the of large numbers in Congress. So if a member of Congress is not really familiar with an issue, but they receive thousands of calls or emails, it brings that issue to the surface for them. And they're like, gosh, I didn't know how this impacted my district or my state. So being engaged, reaching out, there are a lot of different ways you can do that. Technology is great. Now you can send a message to your member of Congress right through the internet. They're always having town halls. There's a really important that they are out there seeking input from their constituents. So there's a lot of forums that you can still participate and be engaged. And I strongly encourage that. And you may not agree with the party of your member of Congress, but remember, they're still representing you. And don't be shy about sharing either the issue or appreciation. It goes a long way. And then they say in Washington, D.C., if you want a friend, get a dog. So anytime which is perfect for us, we love that. So anytime you can also share a thank you to a member of Congress for voting for something that supports there's a lot of appreciation for that.
Dana, may I ask you, because I know I've reached out to my senators and congresspeople as well, just to advocate for women's rights and other issues, but especially as a board certified nutritionist, I am very interested in this act that we're going to be talking about. How perseverant should we be is the question. I don't ever want to be a bother and send the same message over and over and over, but I know the several times I've reached out, I felt like I got a canned response. And so, there's that fine line between really being bothersome, but also trying to support and advocate for something that we truly believe in. And our companion animals' well-being is, very important to all of us. So I'd love your advice, how much is too much and what's not enough?
as a former congressional staffer, I can say there are some that are frequent writers and are that become a little bit challenging. The unfortunate thing about technology is that you do sometimes get these canned responses, and it's that can be off-putting or frustrating. Like, does this really matter? My recommendation to that is call that number, ask for the legislative assistant on your issue. So if you're calling about nutrition, you can say, who's your healthcare or nutrition legislative assistant in the office? I'd please like to share a message with them. Or is there an email address for them that I can send something? So more direct can make a difference. Also, there's nothing wrong with coming to Washington, D.C. and walking the halls of Congress and getting those in-person meetings. Those are very important because then it's a face with a name. You're not just an internet generated letter. So it becomes personal. And then,
So
as I
like
said,
I as a voter could do that. I can go to
absolutely.
DC and say, I request to speak to so and so, please.
hmm You could, it helps to have a meeting. I
Of
will
course.
say that. So that's where you call and ask to schedule a meeting. But, kind of one of those, if that doesn't seem to be getting you anywhere, then the halls of Congress are open. All you have to do is walk through a metal detector and find that congressional office, knock on the door or walk in, share your information. You can hand it right there to the staff assistant at the door, ask them to share this with the person, would love to do a follow-up, give your card. Because one of the things that was important to me when I first moved to Washington, I had a lot of things in my portfolio that I was not comfortable with. But if somebody came by the office, like if they took that time to come by, this is an important issue. If they left a card, I could take it. And then it's like, oh, wait, this issue just popped up. Wait, is that what I have this information on? This constituent from back home came in and gave me this card. Let me reach out to them directly. That's the way it should happen. And I often give little 101s on how to lobby or how to be memorable. And usually you have 5 or 10 minutes to really make an impression on that member of Congress or their congressional staff. And so when you're in there, just be very clear about your ask. Have something you can leave behind so you can say, this is what it is, this is why, this is how it impacts me or your constituents back home. And, you think it just goes in a pile on the desk, and it may, but I can promise you it's going to be dug back out at the appropriate time sometime. And then send a follow-up. Hey, thanks for taking a few minutes with me. I really appreciate it. It is very important. If you have any questions anytime, I would love to have a phone call with you. So there is a way to be persistent, be memorable, tell your personal story. Facts are very important as well. But if it tugs at the heartstring, and that's what we do, we work with pets that change lives, and it's like being able to say my pet or your pet. And again, in our space, it's really easy to start a conversation by going, hey, do you have a pet? What do you have? What's your pet's name? And then when you write that thank you note, like, hey, I hope you and Charlie are doing well. It was so nice to meet you. Thanks for sharing that photo. Here's a picture of my dog, or cat or whatever you have. And it's like you've created a relationship with that person without asking for something. So that's just a few little tips on how to be impactful. Don't dress like a cow. I did have someone do that. That was memorable, but it was like, okay.
Memorable for the wrong reasons.
Yes,
There's
yes.
being memorable and there's being memorable.
I remember this person was dressed like a cow. I have no idea what they wanted, but they were dressed like a cow.
Yeah. You're like, are they with Chick-fil-A
Right.
or are they with the dairy industry?
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Or do they just like milk?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Dana, I think that's really encouraging to know that, we can have that kind of influence. And I think you make a really good point of, kind of being persistent with these issues. I know certainly for me, when I've heard some issue, some topic on face value, I have that that knee-jerk reaction of like, well, this is what I think of it. And then, talking to different people and having it explained through other people's eyes, other people's experiences can make it look completely different from what my initial knee-jerk reaction was. So that makes a lot of sense to take that time and really explain it from our own points of view, to give our representatives just a well-rounded perspective of what the issue looks like to us as individual voters, and why it's important that that votes go a certain way.
Mhm. And they may be influenced from something different, but if they don't hear from you, then they're
They don't
certainly
know.
influenced in the opposite direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's jump into the current legislation that we're talking about. And before we get into the changes, I'd like to talk about just what's in place at the moment and some of the current regulations and the challenges that those have presented around pet food up to this point. I'd love to hear from both of you, just your perspective on current regulations, pros and cons, challenges and benefits that they present.
When I first started talking about how like a bill, how legislation comes about, that's kind of how this started. When I came on at PFI and you look at what are our challenges when, why are we being reactive on something all the time? And is there a way for us to change that trajectory or address the challenges that we have? So that's kind of how it started. It's like, for me, it was, why are we playing whack-a-mole on this issue? And it seems like it never ends. It's the same thing, same thing. It's like, well, this is a definition of insanity. And how can we make a change to that? So, and then COVID came around, and, it was hard for everyone. And we were trying to get products to market. One of the most, people were trying to get their human food as well as their pet food, and you're wanting to keep the shelves full. And some things were, I mean, there were so many things that happened COVID, but what really was hard was when pet owners felt like they could not give their pets the diet they either needed or wanted or met their needs for their pocketbook, just a lot of different things. And we looked at that challenge. Some of it obviously was supply chain, and we couldn't handle that. Obviously, a pandemic, we were not prepared for that. But when we were working in a state that may have created a stumbling block to getting that product to market that had nothing to do with food safety or nutrition, it was a real moment for me, and then for our members. We've got to do something differently. Like this is not working. This is creating a broken, supply chain system that needs to be addressed. It's not, what we're working with is, decades of regulatory system that needs to be modernized. I think we all learned that we're here on a Zoom call that we would not have done before COVID, probably. Like, all technology has changed. And we recognize during that time some challenges that probably were building up, but that hit the breaking point during COVID. And that's where we went with our, for us, for regulatory reform. And that's what we call it modern. When we started off, it's like, let's modernize pet food regulation. How can we make it a better system, a more transparent, consistent system for pet food manufacturers that we represent, pet owners that are purchasing the product, and the pets that are consuming it. And that's what we looked at, and that's how we started to get to the end result that we have today. So I can give more, but I think that maybe gives the backstory to where we are.
I was going to ask if you can elaborate on some of those stumbling blocks that you were running into, but Dr. Bullen, if you have some thoughts on that, then I'll hand it over to you and we can circle back around if we need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. It's really interesting to hear about this from a different side, if you will. I mean, we're all on the same side, right? The side of the pets, the pet parents, and everybody involved. But I definitely see it from, or see challenges from the perspective of the pet parents not having a darn clue what is in their pet's food and what goes into it, or how to read a label. And so when I am communicating with my clients, and it's typically via a Zoom meeting, I spend a good 15 to 20 minutes just talking and educating about how to read a label, how to discern, what ingredients are, because they're not easy. They are not easy to read. And a lot of times I have to empathize and say, you know what? Not only did I have to do 4 years of vet school, but I also had to do a nutrition internship and a 2-year residency and a 1-year postdoc in nutrition to be confident and comfortable to pick up any pet food anywhere and tell you exactly what is going on. And exactly as in just what is on the label. I have no idea what is going on in terms of safety and efficacy and quality control for each individual company. You have to go the extra mile to really investigate that. And so the challenges that I have faced come from helping my pet parents understand not just what is in the label, but how to read it and how to avoid some of the misinformation and myths and miscommunication that labels can bring about due to marketing schemes and ploys. And there is mistrust from the community because, they don't know how to read these labels. They don't know what the information means. And my job is to try to help them feel more comfortable for their pet safety. And you brought in COVID and the pandemic because of the supply chain issues. A lot of pet parents were having to find alternatives to the diet that their pets were on. And so if it is a well pet diet or an over-the-counter, maintenance type diet, there are a lot of other options that could potentially be appropriate. But again, if you don't know how to compare labels, it might be really hard to find that. But heaven forbid that pet was on a prescriptive diet. That's when you needed a veterinary professional to be able to really analyze that nutrient profile and, the ELISA testing that goes into checking for protein DNA to say, hey, this diet is appropriate or not. And it was just a lot. It's a lot. And so I am so excited to talk more about what this bill could potentially do for our industry, not only from a legislative perspective, but from, a safety and efficacy, which I know it says it's not going to change that, but I think it will for the better, and from a veterinary perspective. So, that was kind of my take on the challenges.
Oh my goodness. And I'll chime in a little bit from a GP perspective. When we were talking about supply chain shortages and, people not being able to get the diet that they wanted or they needed for their pet. And you better believe, in a lot of cases, the first person they called to ask was their GP veterinarian. And I don't know about other GPs out there, but I would just get a pit in my stomach when they're like, can you look at this pet food and tell me, what's in it and what's comparable and all of this? Because to your point, Lindsey, saying, doing vet school and your internship and your residency and your postdoc and everything that's involved in getting comfortable with that, I don't think I can confidently as a GP pick up and have that information. I get really thankful for our veterinary nutritionists, for our technical services veterinarians that we can reach out to, because there's a lot there and it's really hard to compare apples to apples.
Well, and I will say that is an issue for another podcast, which I have hours to talk about, and I would love to figure out how to mandate this. But that is a failing of the veterinary school community. Nutrition is often an elective, if it is even offered at all, and it absolutely should be a core course in every veterinary school to be accredited, and it should be taught by a board certified veterinary nutritionist. And it's not saying that somebody who is not a me can't have that knowledge. Of course you can, but it takes time and effort and energy, which most people are delegating to other things. And so that is not a failing of you, Cassi, at all. That is a failing of the education that was offered to you because it was not included. And we are sending thousands of veterinarians out to help these amazing pets and these amazing pet parents. And the one thing these clients ask every day is, what do I feed my pet? Or
Yes.
When COVID happens, now what do we do? And we are not providing the background education and the support to make our amazing general practitioners who are experts in everything confident and comfortable to make these recommendations. And that is a failing of the system, not a failing of you guys.
That's an
Well,
amen from me too, Lindsay. I'm with you on that. And I'm just going to again, I agree this could be a whole nother podcast too, but I will say that my home state of Arkansas is getting the first vet school in the state. We're very excited about it. I'm an alumni of Arkansas State. So you can bet really quickly as this was rolling out, I was excited. I was offering, hey, when you guys get this up and running, let's set up an internship with PFI. I said, but I really want to see you guys offering more in nutrition. And the interesting thing was that the animal science professor agreed with that because he said that most pre-vet students that go through the school only get his nutrition class. And it's really focused on livestock. So I'm going to be that voice of one for that university to continue to remind them, please add this as an opportunity because the pet food industry, we hire nutritionists, and formulators. They have to work together. And if there's a shortage of that and we're snapping them up for our industry, who is doing that in the field? And who do pet parents trust more?
they trust the 16-year-old kid who works in the pet store because they're the ones who are going to offer usually an incorrect opinion.
Yeah.
And veterinarians know enough to not offer an opinion if they don't have good information behind it. But that 16-year-old kid is more than happy to shout about whatever TikTok or Instagram told them.
Right.
And amen, sisters. I don't know how to reach that message.
Yeah.
Well, I will say my wheels are turning, and you're right. Like, we could absolutely turn this into a whole nother podcast episode. Also, Dr. Hill, please don't come hunt me down over saying that he was my nutrition professor in school. It was mandatory. It was not an elective, but it was a short offering because it's 4 years of school and you have to learn everything. And so, it wasn't something we spent a lot of time on. So I love the idea of digging deeper and spending more time on that because
To be
you're
more
right.
Dr. Hill.
Yes, exactly. More of them.
Well, then what you're saying is I had a couple of classes in feeding and nutrition, so I'm as qualified as you.
Oh gosh. Yeah, exactly. And
That's
I
scary.
mean, right. And it is something that we're getting asked every day. So yes, let's come back to this topic because
Okay.
clearly this is an important one with a lot to say. And if I keep talking about this, I'm going to take us in a whole nother direction. We're never
I
going
know,
to
and
talk
I would
about
love
this
to figure
bill.
out, can we actually go to our congresspeople and senators and be like, it needs to be mandated that there's a board certified nutritionist if you have a state vet school.
I
Like,
love that.
right?
Are there enough?
So I think there are enough for right now, but we are starting to dwindle. Board certified
Right.
nutritionists are going away because there is not enough support for their position. So there are less residencies, less residency positions, and it is actually very painful to see my specialty starting to dwindle. And most of us are going to industry because that's
Right.
who recognizes our potential. But again, you have all these amazing folk that are working in different aspects, but nobody to teach the up and coming generations, and not just veterinarians, but veterinary technicians and the veterinary paraprofessionals. They're really the champions, and we need to be teaching everybody. But yes, topic for another time.
I know,
Lindsay,
like
you
I
and
have
I
so
could
many
connect. I
questions.
may can do some pro bono work for you on how to start that process.
I would be honored and privileged to have another opportunity to work with you, and especially one that will help to support the college that I love so much.
We're doing so many good things on this podcast.
What were we going to talk about,
Right? Like,
Cassie?
where were we? What were we doing? Is it? Oh, shoot! It's my job to moderate. Doggone it! I'm failing here. Oh, okay, so circling back around, so let's talk about why we're so excited about this legislation. We've talked about that there's a lot of shortcomings in pet food labeling, and and that creates a lot of hurdles, especially when we get a major upset like a pandemic. So how are we fixing that? What does this new legislation look like, and how is it going to benefit the veterinary industry and consumers?
The challenge that we really see, again, you think about 100 years ago, kind of how this started. It's like kind of crazy to talk about that. But, feed was manufactured more locally. So, and it had a purpose for livestock. Maybe, you wanted to make sure the ration was appropriate for, a mama cow versus maybe a beef cow. So, or a dairy cow. So it started with when the products were manufactured in that state, that the state, the creative feed control official that would make sure what was in the bag was representative of what was on the label for that. So, you wanted to make sure that you were feeding the right consistency for the right either breed or livestock, that animal. Well, then as we started having more pets that became not just working animals for the farm, but became companion animals for us, there was a need for, you know, pet food to become more complete and balanced, nutritious. And that's kind of the history of how pet food started. Well, because it kind of started sometimes being made in the feed in the feed mills, then it became the feed control official or the regulator for the state that was checking that as well. Well, let's fast forward to where we are today. Um, that process of looking at every single package, what's on the label, what's, maybe in the ingredient deck, and matching that up in every single state has become a challenge because each state has their own rules or regulations or line of sight or individual interpretation so much. So we're not state by state pet food manufacturers. We're not even regional. We are national and international. We are global products. And when you are making a product that will be sold from coast to coast, maybe for the entire North America, because Canada and Mexico are our top, two in the top three of our trading partners, then you really need a consistent label and ingredients naming and claims that you need some, again, consistency there. Well, if an individual state says, well, you know what, I don't really know what this product is, or I'm not certified to be able to make these decisions. So in this line of question, I'm just going to deny that ingredient to be used in pet food. And then that's where that's where we spend a lot of time, is going to say, no, it's been approved, it's here, it's been used in other states. So you really spend a lot of times, and during that time, that company could receive a stop sale in that state. Well, again, maybe if it was an individual state, you're like, okay, well, we can just stop and we can figure this out and we can send it. But that's also not the way. Again, we're not state to state distribution system. We are, think about the stores that you can go into today to buy your pet food. They're big box stores. That's where you go in, you're buying your human food, you're buying your toiletries, you may be buying your, child's clothes, and without naming names. And then there's 2 aisles of pet products that are there. And those go into large distribution centers. And in that, and even if you're going to a pet retailer, all pet is still going into a distribution center. So a member can't go, a company can't say, well, if that one state makes a change, we can stop it for that one state until we get this all worked out. No, it disrupts maybe an entire region that's going through that distribution center. And let's go back to where we started too. If that is the desired meal for that pet, or through prescription diet, again, we go, complete and balanced, nutritious, and choice, you've broken that. And most of the time, almost all the time, it never has to do with making any of those changes. Like, it does not compromise food safety. It does not compromise nutrition. It is an interpretation or a lack thereof understanding of what that product does. But even crazier, now I can get like, oh, I don't understand this ingredient, or this is a complex term, where we would prefer to be able to use more common names and ingredient deck, but we're very we've been forced into this very technical space. So we're always having to explain what this ingredient is. We're excited about maybe being able to have a little more common names, but that's another podcast too, I believe, how to read a label. And we provide some of that information on our website. But the true story, there may be a state, and this has actually happened, where they question why there was an S on minerals, because that's what is defined that we should put on there. Now, in that product only had one mineral. So the state said, well, this is confusing to consumers because, and you're misrepresenting this because you have an S on minerals and you will have one mineral. So you need to change your package for this product. It was a pet food, and to be able to get this product back into the state. The company spent a lot of money to make that change. And then the 3 or 4 other states that surrounded that was like, what happened to the S? Because it's defined in a publication that you're supposed to have an S. And it's like you're going in circles with this. And it's like, okay, so you're telling us the consumers are going to be confused about a lack of an S. Again, this product is complete and balanced. It's nutritious. There's food safety measures that have gone into place. Can't even quantify the dollar amount that's gone into the formulation of the product, the packaging, to change the package, to go through that, and then there in this time, the product is not on the market, that you can be sure with this type of product that there were people looking for the product for their pet. And it's just, this became the challenge over and over again. I'm like, what? This is totally unnecessary and disruptive. So that's kind of where it was that's kind of where we started. Those are some examples of why we said it's time to modernize. It's time to improve. It's time to create a system that provides, the transparency, the consistency, uniformity for a regulatory system that we have to abide by. And, a lot of companies now, they are diversified. So they're not only pet food, and they're like, we can get anything else on the shelves in these states except for our pet food over a typo or a color change or a with or without an S or with or without an asterisk. And it's like, it's absolutely an unnecessary over regulatory action for us. So those are my examples. I see Lindsey's mouth open on this. So happy to pass it over to her and answer questions that she's going to have, because I can see her eyes light up too.
So it is so interesting to hear you provide those examples, because it brings me joy in a way that they're actually looking into that, because I have had the complete opposite experience where I have seen so many brand new pet foods. I mean, I feel like you could just dream about a pet food and then suddenly it's, like on a shelf. I have seen so many, even in my region, that are not compliant with state regulations. And I have contacted our state fee control officials and been like, hey, as a veterinarian, this is concerning to me because of X, Y, Z. I'm trying to bring it to your attention. And so I completely understand the frustration and just like, honestly, the waste of money and effort and energy
and
with
product.
Your examples and product. I mean, that is appalling. And yet I've seen the other side too, where I feel like there are so many new products coming out that are not actually following what they're supposed to do. So they're making it to shelves, and then there's not enough feed control officials that are adequately trained to be able to actually go and evaluate all of these products to make sure that they're actually following the rules and that they are safe and nutritious and efficacious. So it's, I mean, same, or I guess, different sides of the same coin, if you will, but still problematic. And so I'm so excited to make this more uniform and less confusing, not just for pet parents, but clearly that like the officials are confused as to what they're supposed to be doing. And the pet food companies, I mean, what I have always heard from the big guys, because they're the ones that are under the scrutiny all the time, and they're the ones that absolutely do everything they're supposed to be doing. They've informed me, we look at all 50 states and territories, and we figure out which one is the most conservative, which one is going to give us the most problems. And that's the one that we do the regulations for because most of the other guys are pretty darn close. But like, how exhausting to have
Hmm.
somebody have to look at 50 different regulations and the territories. It's
Yeah.
just a waste of energy and effort. And as a working mom, and you don't even have to be a mom, but just as a working mom, I don't have the energy for that.
Mhm.
Like, who does? I would much rather have our officials' energy going to what is actually important and have the pet food companies stop needing to spend so much money on label changes and marketing because that's what they're doing and put that towards nutrition research and
Mhm.
development and safety and advocacy and quality control. And this is what I was talking about. I know that the act is not supposed to change nutrition and safety, but I feel like it could only help it because they don't need to spend so much money on all the bureaucratic BS in the
Well, just
background. It's going to streamline it, should make it
yeah,
easier, and then put
just
that
think
money where
about
it can help.
if you try to change a formula or if there's something innovative out there, then try to imagine getting an innovative product or ingredient to market and you don't know, maybe that state that has been a challenge in the past, you spent a lot of time and they're like, oh yeah, okay, we'll take, and then something else pops up somewhere else. They're like, wait, we don't, what is this? What are you using? I've never heard of this. So we also think that this will encourage innovation because it's so expensive to make these changes in the unknown, you know, 50 state environment. So if we have, one federalized system, then, it's yes or no, or we need more research or we need more information, then you know what direction you need to go in. And you mentioned something too about, I'm not going to small versus large, but I do know there are, I mean, everyone wants to make pet food. And I think there's some safety risk in that when you don't understand, like you're like, oh yeah, I can put more of this in it because I need, but if you don't understand the way different ingredients interact with each other and then go through a processing, what you start with may not be the end result after the combination of such. So you can have the most love and best intentions in making a product that you actually are doing more harm. So that's where we absolutely believe that the role that the states continue to maintain is that surveillance and compliance and inspection, they could spend more time on that and less time going through, well, what's on the label. And if they receive a report and we're like, hey, if a consumer has questions about something, or if you as a veterinarian going, I got a pet that came in that's deficient in something, and this is what they're feeding, then you can report that either to FDA or to the state, and then they should be the ones to take the action to make sure what that pet parent is feeding is complete and balanced, nutritious, and what's on the label is in the package. And we continue to say that to the state regulators that are concerned about what we're doing. We're like, we are not compromising on food safety. That is very important to us. And if you have reason to believe that what is in the package does not match up with what is on the package, then please inspect. Please do what you need to do because that is very important to us. And the last thing we want people to think or see is that we're making this change to be sneaky or hide stuff or harm any animals. We are pet owners ourselves, and not only just that, I mean, it's also our business and our own integrity and credibility on the line. So it's not something that we take lightly. And when we talk about what our bill does and doesn't do, the number, we just say it does not compromise food safety. We do not want to do that. We'll continue to provide the resources that are needed, and we don't amend the food and drug, we don't amend FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act that was put in place. That's very important for both human and animal food.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm seeing so many direct to consumer products now, and a lot of them I have no idea
Completely
what they're doing.
unregulated.
They're completely unregulated. And so when somebody hires me as a consultant to say, hey, what do we do? I don't formulate. I don't have the credentials for that. I just try to guide them as what I expect as a veterinary nutritionist in terms of safety. And the first thing I do is say, you need to talk with somebody about regulatory. Like, I will help you hook up with somebody in pet food safety, from
Hmm.
K-State or something like that.
Hmm.
I will help you from a nutrition perspective, but you need to have a regulatory team because there are so many nuances of what goes into formulating, producing, and getting to market a safe product that checks all the boxes. And I've
Yes.
seen so many different products that it's too hard to do that. So they
Hmm.
just do it. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh. And those obviously aren't ones I work with, but that is my concern
Yes.
as a veterinarian
Ours
is
too.
there is no regulation. And this is why we have these amazing regulatory bodies in
Hmm.
place is to
Hmm.
keep our pets safe and to try to make it transparent and
Hmm.
not to halt innovation and new
Hmm.
products, but to make it clearer for these folks that want to do it how to do a good job so that the pets don't just survive, but so they thrive. And that is one reason why I'm so excited about this act or this bill.
Our mission is longer, healthy lives for pets. So that's what we do, and that's what we want to do. And that's why we think this is also the right thing to do.
So I just want to jump in real quick from my GP perspective, who knows a limited amount about this, that we're talking about the PURR Act, and you guys have done an amazing job of really illustrating the benefit that this is going to bring to the industry. And I love the differing point of views. I think it gives that well-rounded perspective we talked about earlier in the conversation. So I'm wondering if as we kind of wrap up here, can you from each of your perspectives kind of explain what exactly the change is? What is the PURR Act actually doing within the pet food industry?
So the PURR Act is the Pet Food Uniform Regulatory Reform Act. So yes, someone on staff came up with that clever little name, PURR Act, and goes back to memorable. And the House bill is HR 7380. And you can just put that into your Google search and you can find it and you can read about it. But what the change that we are supporting is to move away from that state by state pre-market label review process. And we believe that gives those states the resources to be able to do what's important to us and to Lindsey, and that is the inspection, surveillance, compliance part of their jobs, rather than individual label reviews every single year on every single product, whether there was a single change on it or not. So no, we're not talking about new products, we're talking about all products. So that's, millions of millions of labels that have to be reviewed. We also want to see that FDA, the Food and Drug Administration Center for Veterinary Medicine, is like kind of the one-stop shop for this. Now, they still have cooperative agreements with states, and there's going to still be a very important role for the states to play in food safety. But when it comes to ingredient names and approval, we have supported that FDA be that place for that. So everything that has been approved in the past would be automatically pulled over under FDA in a place where you can look it up. You can see here's the ingredient name, here's what it is, here's the claim that has been approved. So we know that what we are saying and doing is, as a federal approval, and that we is recognized nationally and internationally rather than individual or state by state. So that's kind of where, that's the two big things is that we want to move away from that, state by state pre-market, and then we want to codify what's already being used or approved through even the AFCO Association of State Control Officials, Feed Control Officials. This has been a lot of really good work that's been done over the years. But then once those things are federalized or codified into federal law, then everybody knows what can and can't be used. So, and that it's easily accessible online, that you should be able to go in and look, and it directs you to a federal resource that says this is what is and isn't. So it's kind of the basics of what it does and what is most important to us.
Well, I also saw that it's supposed to amend the FD&C Act. And so, or that's the Food,
Mhm.
Drug, and Cosmetics Acts for those
Yeah.
of you that don't know. And so, for me, when I look at that, when I am trying to educate people in terms of food labels and regulation, and I don't even touch regulation. I'm like, not me, go talk to somebody else. But I steal your words and I try to teach that. One of the things that I was curious about is the prescription diet. Does this act do anything with that? Because what I always hear from my pet parents is, well, it's prescription because those pet food companies, they want to make money. And I was like, first of all, yes, they do, because it is a business. So yes, like just go ahead and get that off the plate. Of course they want to make money. However, it is a prescription because they are not considered complete and balanced, or they are designed to help support your pet through a disease process.
Mhm.
Now, I know we can't necessarily say it's designed to treat because that makes it seem like it's a medication, but when
Mhm.
you dive into it, really it looks like those prescriptive products are adulterated drugs, but because they are being given to pet parents with a prescription and under the guidance of a veterinary professional, where they look the other way is kind of how I came to understand it. And so when I'm talking to my pet parents and I say, yes, it's prescription because this diet is not appropriate for your other pets. And most pet parents do not have the background or education to safely and appropriately select said prescription diets. It's just like, as a doctor, yes, I could go to a pharmacy and say, I want this drug, but there are not many people that could do that. My husband would make a clear mess of things because he is non-medical. And that's just one way he would make a mess. I'm totally kidding. I love him. But the point is that or I guess my question, not even the point, is what changes or what amendments would it make to that act? And does it help from that kind of prescriptive side?
We will not. We believe that that is very important to have the prescription diets, to have the veterinarian provide that. So we don't change that. We don't make it easier. We don't make it harder. Again, if those diets, if in a state though, if a fee control official pulled that and was like, I don't understand this or this claim that's on it, again, just the ingredients and the claims would be recognized federal, will be approved federal. I think any prescription diets would be approved federal. So this does not give easier access without a prescription. It's very important. I completely get that. And again, long and healthy lives for pets, and you know what's best for your patients.
I appreciate you explaining that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There is just so much amazing content here that I mean, I can come up with like, I don't know, a lot more questions to keep going. And we've kind of alluded to other topics and everything along those lines. But I know I've taken a lot of your time and I so appreciate both of you coming on. The unique perspectives have just really given a lot of information. I know I've learned a lot and really have been given a lot to think about from multiple different angles. So I want to say a huge thank you to Dana, to you, Lindsey. Thank you so much for joining me for all of the great information. I really do hope you take me up on that and we can do more about nutrition education and everything along those lines. But as far as the PURR Act goes, it sounds like this could be a really positive move in the veterinary industry. And I'm so thankful to have both of you on to explain it.
It's my pleasure, absolutely. And it's been a treat to get to know you and look forward to talking to you some more. And never hesitate to reach out. And if you have any questions or you receive any from your clients, from pet, I mean, most of my questions come from friends and family, and they ask the hardest ones because they're not afraid. Please ask. We're happy to be a resource. But sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So if you're hearing things out there or you have an idea for us, we welcome that. We want to be inclusive to information sharing as well. But we just did a website revamp. So hopefully, please plug that. We're making it more pet parent friendly. We're trying to make it where they understand complete and balance. They understand how to read a label. They understand why your pet may need carbohydrates, even if you don't think you do, or what, like big thing right now, people are talking about is copper. Well, there's a little bit about the importance of minerals and what minerals are, what they do and how it targets what it does for their health. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to do, but My colleague Kelly Canaris, we're going to spend some time on misinformation out there, and I think that may be an opportunity for us all to talk about what information is out there that leaves us all scared for our pet and fur friends out there, to make sure that they understand why nutrition is important, and how to again, how to read the label, and what your pet needs and doesn't need, and we shouldn't always try to replicate their food after our own. and just we welcome any input from you guys anytime.
Well, Dana, along those lines, as a GP who's always looking for good resources on where to send pet parents, what is the website address?
Oh, thank you for asking. You can just Google Pet Food Institute. We're in Washington, D.C. So petfoodinstitute.org. Wait a second. All of a sudden I was saying .org. I need to make sure
.org.
it is. It is.
I'm on there right now.
.org. Sometimes I like .com, .org, .net, but it is .org. Petfoodinstitute.org. Kelly, make sure I got it right.
No, and it's such a pleasure, as always, to be here with you, Cassie, and a privilege, Dana, to be able to have this conversation with you and to learn from you. As I said, I've been a fangirl just because I don't know enough about regulatory, and so it's really wonderful to have such a wealth of information at our fingertips from somebody so obviously invested in our pets' health. And for those of you listening, I actually have gone to their website for information on the PURR Act, because when I was asked to be a guest, I was like, I'd love to talk. I'm like, oh, regulatory legislation? That is not within my wheelhouse. Let me investigate this further. And you all have done a wonderful job explaining what the proposal is. You even have like a little summary about what it does, what it doesn't do. It's so beautiful for not only veterinary professionals, but also for our pet parents that are not veterinary associated. And just, again, a wealth of information. So happy to be able to have been here today and to talk with you.
Lindsey, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such a pleasure to have both of you. Thanks again. All right, to everyone who's stuck with us, I hope you enjoyed that discussion. So much great information there about the legislative process, the PURR Act, the role of nutrition education in veterinary medicine. I really do hope that there's more to come there, because I think there's a bigger discussion, particularly on the education piece. In the meantime, I want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Bullen. Thank you to Dana Brooks for joining me. You both were fantastic. And a huge thank you to Embrace for making this episode possible. And thanks to everyone out there who tuned in. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It'll help other veterinary professionals like you find this and other great content we try to put out there. For more episodes like this, click on the Education tab on the VetFolio website. As always, we'd love to hear your input on this talk, as well as ideas for topics you'd like to hear from us in the future. Feel free to reach out to me at dvm@vetfolio.com. You can also visit my Facebook page at Dr. Cassi DVM, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And remember, if one animal is better off because of you today, it's a great day.